Hello, welcome back or welcome if you're new. It's good to see you. My name is Vix and this is my channel Goddess of Gore, where I like to talk about horror, thriller, fantasy and sci-fi books. March is finished and I read 16 books. Shall we put them into some kind of order? Let's get on with it. I'm obviously going to keep this relatively short and sweet. I will talk about the books in the order I read them, the format I read them, and the rating I gave, and all the links to the weekly wrap-ups will be in the description box and in the cards above if you want to hear more about the books I read. So, the first book of the month of March was Sourcery by Terry Pratchett, and I gave this 4 stars. This was for the Around the Disc in 800 or So Days read-along, hosted by Leanne from Literary Diversions on YouTube and Kirsty, who is Melb Reads on Instagram. This was another one of the Rincewind books and I didn't have a good time. Now that I think about it, it should have been a 3-star, but I'd have to change it then. Next was The Trees Grew Because I Bled There by LaRocca. I read this on ebook as an advanced copy from NetGalley. I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. This was a short story collection about relationships and of course obsession when they go a little too far and inappropriate coupling, shall we say. Another gifted ebook was Hidden Pictures by Jason Rekulak. This was a bit problematic, but I still gave it 4 stars because it dragged me in and those creepy pictures were the stars of the book, even though my ebook copy was all broken up. I'm going to show you, hang on. So that was what my copy looked like. Like this silliness. I was impressed. So this was about a live-in nanny who thinks the little kid she's looking after is possessed by some ghost, and little Ted is scratching out some amazingly creepy drawings about his imaginary friend who lurks in the corner of his bedroom. Then in week 2 of the month, it was the week of Wyrd. So for that, I read The King in Yellow by Robert W. Chambers. I got this on audio. This was an interlinked short story collection, all with a theme of having the book The King in Yellow, which was a play at the time within the book world. And the book was being banned by the world's governments for the effects it was having on the population. If you've read this book, that sentence would have made some sense. Maybe. The stories are the effects of reading the play. This was a fantastic book. I loved it, but for some reason I only gave that 5 stars. Maybe I'll put it up to 4.5. Then it was Paradise Rot by Jenny Hval. I bought this on ebook and I gave this 4 stars. Again, it was a fabulous book. The writing was so good, but I think I gave it 4 because it was so weird. Then Raw by Cecelia Ahern, 4 stars given. I listened to this one on audio and it was very funny. It's a short story collection with a lot of witty feminism about the aging process of women, that kind of thing. I thought it was going to be weird, and yeah, it kind of was, but mainly wasn't. It was more of euphemisms for womanhood, I guess. I don't know. Then The Library at Mount Char by Scott Hawkins. I was given this on ebook for review from NetGalley and wow, this one was a very weird book. I mean, all the books I read for the week of Wyrd were a little strange, but this one, it took some planning, let me tell you. I gave this 5 stars and how could I not? It took me in all kind of weird directions. It made me laugh, it made me cry, it made me anxious, and it was fabulous. I loved it. So back to reality in week 3, or what I call the week of the doozy, with The Writing Retreat by Julia Bartz. Again, a gifted ebook, and this was bland and in my opinion boring. Everything felt extra and overly dramatic and I just wasn't buying it. It didn't thrill me or excite me, so I gave it a generous 3 stars because it did make me feel something. Anger at how hyped up it had been. The premise: a struggling author gets through the first stage of a writing competition and gets to go to a famous author's retreat with the prospect of writing a book with a load of other authors, and the winner of that gets a huge amount of money and a publishing deal. They've all done something so-called evil in their lives, but it turns out to be cheated on a test or dropped some litter or something as dastardly as that. Boring. The Magician's Daughter by H.G. Parry, another gifted book.
Side note, I don't usually read so many gifted books from NetGalley in a month, but I did go kind of wild at the beginning and they're all building up, and I do mention this in all of last year's wrap-ups about the amount of arcs I have been given and how they could fill a library, but I don't want to talk about it because it makes me anxious and gives me palpitations.
The Magician's Daughter then. I started this before the week of Wyrd and I kept trying to talk myself out of picking it back up again. But again, I gave this a generous 3 stars. This was another boring book. I kept waiting for something to happen, but nah, it wasn't for me. This was about a girl called Biddy who was raised on a secluded island in a world that had banned magic because there was a shortage of magic. She was secluded from the big bad world by her guardian Rowan and a rabbit who was sometimes a man called Hutch. They have to go to the so-called bad world of London to wheedle out the other magicians in hiding who for some reason want Biddy for themselves, and she eventually does get taken. This was an extremely long book for that story and I didn't enjoy it at all. As I said, I kept waiting for some excitement, but it never came. Smoke and Mirrors by Neil Gaiman. I read this on ebook that I own. This was the 3rd book of the year of Gaiman Read Along, a year-long reading list thought up by Leanna over at Leanna's Library on YouTube, and I think she's hosting it on a Patreon, but she does talk about them on YouTube too. I do go into more detail of my favourite short stories from this book in my weekly wrap-up, so if you want to know which ones I actually enjoyed, go and look there. This was a 3-star for me, a short story collection that had been written for other publications or written and rejected. They were all pretty much fantastical fairy tales or moral lessons, but there were some really good ones in here, but not as many as there should have been though. Weird Sisters by Terry Pratchett, book 6 in the Around the Disc Readathon, or book 2 of the Witches of the Disc series, and obviously I gave it 5 stars. This was a silly story about 3 witches who are given a baby while they're huddled over their cauldron one night and told he is the heir to the throne now that the king is dead, and can they keep him for safety. Obviously, they give the baby away to a troupe of travelling actors and the crown is left in the props box. The rest of the book is how the kingdom is being ruled by a tyrannous ruler and the baby Tom John grows into a wonderful boy. The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. I gave this 4.5 stars. Should I have given it the full 5? Too much singing. It's lost half a point. This is about a hobbit called Bilbo who gets swept up on an adventure with some dwarves and a wizard to take back the home of the dwarves that is currently stolen and being used as a nest by a dragon, a home that is 1,000,000 miles away, and the shenanigans they get up to while getting there. Yeah, sums it up. And then for the final week, week 4, that I just wrapped up, I read Blindsighted by Karin. I gave this 4.5 stars and I loved it. It ended up being a reread, and you know what? It felt like a hug from a loved one. It was good to be back to a fantastic dark thriller. Lots of slicing and dicing, blood and guts, grisly killings, you know the stuff. The things we all love in a good thriller. So we get to meet the 3 main characters in the Grant County series. Sarah Linton, I googled it, coroner, go me. Jeff Tollier, the police chief, and Lena Adams, the detective. These guys are in every one of the Grant County books and they're great, flawed characters. This one deals with the slaying of Lena's sister right at the start, as well as some other brutal murders and of course the investigation into who done it. The London Science Society by Sarah Penner, another gifted ebook from NetGalley. I gave this 4 stars. It really was fun. A proper historical paranormal mystery, very atmospheric and very easy to submerge yourself into the story, I thought. This follows two murders, one whose sister is in Paris working as a student of a famous psychic, Vaudeline de Allier, and the second is the head of the London Seance Society. We are given hints as the story unfolds as to who done it. I really enjoyed this book. As I said, I do want to read Sarah's earlier book, The Lost Apothecary now. Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. This was for the Sweater Weather book club that I'm part of, where we read and talk about cosy fiction and pick monthly read-alongs every quarter. Now, the book for March was technically Legends and Lattes, but I chose to read this, which was, I think, last November's pick of the month. I gave this 4 stars and I loved it. And I realised I never mentioned the significance of the scissors on the cover during my wrap-up, did I? As I said the other day, an elf meets up with a young Dora when she is running to play in the trees. He tries to take her as payment for a debt of her mother's, who promised him her firstborn child. Luckily, before he could take her back to his fairy kingdom or whatever, cousin Vanessa stabs him with her embroidery scissors, and he vanishes. This left Dora in a peculiar state with the lack of emotions, devoid of half her soul. This is just in the first chapter, so it isn't a spoiler, by the way. So, now grown, the girls are taken to London to parade them around at balls and events in the prospects of getting them a husband. And the relationship that Dora gets swept up into in this is magical and lovely. The scissors she wears around her neck, just in case the elf comes and takes the rest of her soul. So she does look a little strange with a big pair of scissors hanging around her neck. If you're getting into the cosy fiction community, I think you should read this one. I just have to add one in my world every month so I can keep the colour in my cheeks. The Amber Spyglass by Philip Pullman, another idea of Leanna's to read his Dark Materials collection and the Books of Dust. This was a great ending to the first trilogy, I thought, and I gave it 5 stars. It is a little too long for a kid's book, I feel, but it had plenty happening in it. The conclusion of the book was heartbreaking and I wouldn't change a thing about it. It was a majestic final book. So, which were the 3 best of the month? Play the music. Number 3, The Hobbit. I love The Hobbit, sis, and I can't wait to start the Fellowship of the Ring in May. Number 2 is Blindsighted. I loved it. It was really refreshing and nostalgic at the same time to read a classic in the dark thriller subgenre. But the best book I read this month at number 1 is The Trees Grew Because I Bled There by LaRocca. It was a toss-up between this and The Library at Mount Char, but I think I enjoyed this a little more because it was easier to read and I loved it straight from the start. So, what was the biggest surprise then? Of course, The Library at Mount Char by Scott Hawkins. Why? Because I didn't think I was going to like it, and it is a chunky book, but it was well worth the wait for it to grab you, and the author, you've got to give him some credit. I mean, how did he begin this book? Did he start at the end and work his way back, or what? So that is it. March is all wrapped up. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you giving up your time to watch this video, and don't forget to like if you liked it and subscribe if you want to stick around. I always have a quote about the month we have left behind, so I will leave you with this. March came in that winter like the meekest and mildest of lambs, bringing days that were crisp and golden and tingling, each followed by a frosty pink twilight which gradually lost itself in an elfland of moonshine. That was a nice one. Make some good book choices this week, my friends, and I hope to see you all again soon. Until next time, bye-bye.